There wasn't a lot of hope for The Office when it first started filming. One of the people who didn't think it would work out was Paul Rudd. In fact, the actor straight up told Steve Carell not to take the role. Now you know that Carell was really smart about the entire show, and it ended up being a much more popular show. Even though its first season had a rough start, Carell brought things together for 7 seasons. Despite being an adaptation of the original show made by Ricky Gervais, essentially to be more appealing to the American audience, the show managed to get even more popular than the British version, especially in recent years. On the other hand, Rudd was convinced that the show simply wouldn't be able to live up to the original show, claiming that the British version was an absolute masterpiece. Of course, that's the same thing he told Carell, though we only found out about the entire thing in 2021 when one of the cast members, Brian Baumgartner, and the executive producer, Ben Silverman, put out a book about the show. Not just that, but Rudd to his face told him that it wasn't a good idea at all to even try it. But as we all know, The Office was a huge success, but it wasn't always like that. The first season got mid ratings, and the show was actually on the brink of getting canceled even before the good part would start. How'd it come back though? Well, you can thank streaming services and fans for that.
Let's leave, but before we leave, my wet friend and I are gonna wait for our cabs on your nice couches.
Can you call us a cab, please? Oh, sorry.
Look, my clothes are so wet.
Wet. Nice leather. Oh, my shoes are so muddy. All right, here you go. Take it back.
Where on earth did this character come from, Steve Carell? Is it based on anyone at all?
It is completely fictional.
We have a clip right here. Do we need to set this up?
This is Mitch Kessler talking to his agent, trying to figure out what the next step will be.
Okay, Jim.
Making it the sensation of an entire generation and slinging it to the front of pop culture. Not just that, but the format they used. The whole mockumentary thing turned into a huge trend in the film industry, with many shows following in its footsteps. It is truly worthy of all the awards and accolades that the show managed to win throughout its 9 seasons, with even one Golden Globe Award under its belt.
We're here with Steve Carell. Steve, recently reported, this is news. This is breaking news.
Uh-oh.
The Office is the most watched program, most streamed program on Netflix.
An ordinary paper company like Dunder Mifflin was a great subject for a documentary. There's a lot of beauty in ordinary things. Isn't that kind of the point?
Ladies and gentlemen, the cast of The Office.
Oh my God.
We go now to our entertainment correspondent, Steve Carell.
Since the show won so much, the person steering that wheel ended up winning some too. The very same Golden Globe Award was won by none other than Carell over an incredible performance. But if you take a closer look at the show, you start to realize that many things it shows off or considers a joke are offensive, especially with how it talks about race and gender. Though that's not to say that it doesn't have many incredible characters, a super engaging story, and some insane talent that worked on it. But Steve Carell wasn't always a part of the shenanigans in The Office. The actor ended up leaving the show after 7 whole seasons because he felt like there wasn't a place for him anymore. But if he had listened to Rudd, he never would have come across the success he did because of The Office. How do the two actors even know each other, though? Well, they starred together in Anchorman: The Legend of Ron Burgundy. The film came out just a year before the hit show starring Carell. The two worked together on a comedy film that was full of satire and came from the mind of none other than Adam McKay. It's essentially the story of a news station and the anchors that worked at it who must face off against their rival anchormen to completely change the TV news scene. Later in the same year, they even put out more content from the film that included all kinds of unused scenes and alternate takes in a super rough and unfinished way called Wake Up, Ron Burgundy, The Lost Movie. Enough about the movie though. Who did Carell even play? He was the weatherman at the news station, Brick Tamlin, while Rudd played Brian Fantana, the main character's friend. The two ended up becoming close to one another because of that film, which is why Rudd wanted to warn Carell before making such a huge decision. The actor did leave The Office later, but how did the show cope with with his departure. Carell's Michael Scott was considered the heart and soul of the entire show, and his leaving did a lot of damage to the show, something it could never recover from. The writers had the hardest time ever giving the character the goodbye he deserved. All of you probably remember that he left with Holly since he couldn't let go of the love of his life and wanted to start a life with her, but most people don't know that he started a paper company of his own too. His leaving the show was such a huge blow to the show that it completely lost its comedic end, and Rainn Wilson had to carry the entire show on his back. The show's ratings still dropped a lot, and the show ended 2 seasons after that. That was already expected to happen, since the show couldn't recover from losing one of the most iconic characters in an entire decade. But that's what we think of the show and the character. What does Carell think of him? Let's look at Steve Carell sharing his thoughts on playing Michael Scott in The Office. If you followed the actor for a while, you know that from the start, he always felt that The Office would bring something great to the table. Even though a lot of people out there, even some of the actor's friends, such as Paul Rudd, and some of the cast members, thought that the show wasn't going to go anywhere, Carell always knew it was special. Turns out he was right. Though back then, he went to lunch with some other actors on the cast and told them that he thought the show would turn out to be something that would define their career for the rest of their lives. It's almost like he was just predicting the future at that point. How did he manage to think about the show with such depth? Not just that, how did he even find any depth in Michael Scott? How could a character that was as offensive and problematic like Michael Scott end up being loved and adored by everyone? It was simply by figuring out that the character had a good heart and never intended bad things. The actor even talked about the entire thing in an interview about one of the most offensive episodes in the show, Diversity Day. But in the end, it all comes down to the character being ignorant and not intolerant. On the one hand, he's always trying his best, but at times, he simply doesn't know a lot and ends up saying some horrifying things. The actor ends up laughing when people call his character racist. The character just doesn't know how to be woke and ends up coming off as that. But he's still trying with a super kind heart full of good. But is that true, or does Carell just look for the good in all of his characters? Taking a look at the very same interview, the actor was asked that question, to which he simply replied that it's part of his job. I mean, he's kind of right. If you don't think you're playing as a good person, you'll just end up judging them, ultimately playing a completely different character. The actor then talked about how the character is the type of guy who would never value one person over another, making him a pure character. Sure, he was super dumb regarding some important issues, but at the end of the day, he was good where it mattered the most. That's it for all you need to know about Michael Scott and Steve Carell. See you in the next video.